I used to think that the more love you showed, the more attention you paid, the more you satisfied all her desires, the more the woman in your life realized how lucky she was to have you. Now I don't think that way anymore. I now think that all those things just make her take you for granted, make her think there's nothing she can't do, and you're keeping her relaxed and making excuses for her. Sabrina and I met in our junior year of college. We started dating and were in a one-on-one relationship for the rest of junior year. We both seemed to really like each other and we enjoyed sex, but neither of us were at the point where we wanted to get into a permanent relationship. In the middle of our senior year of high school, we met again, and this time we stayed together. 6 months after graduation, we were married. Shortly thereafter, my parents celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, and during the party, I caught my dad alone and asked him how he and my mom managed to stay happy with each other for so long. I pointed to a few couples we knew who seemed like they couldn't go a week without fighting about something. How do you and Mom manage not to be like everyone else? The secret, son, is to tell them every day that you love them, and show them every day that you love them. Never let yourself take for granted that they know it. Always show it. Every day of your marriage, show it. It's that simple. I took his advice to heart, and for the next 7 years, not a day went by that I didn't tell Sabrina I loved her. I never forgot a birthday, anniversary, or other special occasions, and I even had a list of nonsense anniversaries that I used as an excuse to give cards, flowers, and other special gifts. I sent Sabrina flowers on the anniversary of the first time she made meatloaf and the first time she used our new washer and dryer. I gave her a card on the anniversary of her first promotion at work. No event was too big or too small for me to write it down and use. She got flowers and candy on the anniversary of our first extreme sex. She got diamond earrings in honor of our first time. I sent her flowers to the office for no reason at all, just so she'd get an "I love you" card in the middle of the workday. I did everything I could think of to show her how much she meant to me. I followed my father's advice, but my father used his relationship with my mom as an example. He didn't take into account that different women look at the same things differently. Whereas my mom looked at it as a sign of my father's constant love for her, Sabrina saw it as a sign of my insecurity and that I was doing it to beg for her attention. Somehow my desire to show her my love devalued me in her eyes. I didn't know this, of course, and went on with my life knowing that I had a happy and loving marriage. Sabrina and I were excelling in our chosen fields. We were both climbing the corporate ladder, and as we moved up, work required more time, more energy, quite a few late nights and occasional business trips. There were nights when we didn't even see each other. I was working late and Sabrina was asleep when I got home, or vice versa. I accepted it as the price we paid for success, and I assumed Sabrina did too. When we were together, I did my best to make up for the time apart. The sex was amazing. There were weekends when we didn't even get dressed. Sabrina would smile and tell me she was mine forever, and I certainly believed it. I found out at her company's Christmas party. It was held at a hotel downtown. Her company rented a ballroom and several guest rooms. The party was on a Wednesday night, and I told Sabrina that I would meet her there. The party started at 7, but I had a client from out of town that I had to put on an 8 o'clock flight, so I told Sabrina not to expect me until 8:30 or so. At the last minute, the client decided to stay another day and sightsee, so I arrived at the party at 7:30. I entered the ballroom just in time to see Sabrina with a man I didn't recognize, but then I didn't know most of the people she worked with since I'd only seen them at picnics and Christmas parties. What I found odd was that Sabrina had her arm around his waist. I headed towards the room they had entered, and upon entering it, I found it to be something like a hallway with 3 rooms branching off from it. I wondered which room they had entered, so I tried the one closest to me and found it empty, as was the room next to it. I was about to close the door and enter the 3rd room when I heard a giggle. It seemed to be coming from the room even though it looked empty, so I went back inside to get a closer look. I heard another giggle and saw that it was coming from a vent in the ceiling. It dawned on me that I could hear what was going on in the next room. I was already heading for the door to go into the next room when I heard Sabrina say, "Careful, you don't want to rip your dress." There was a pause, and then the man groaned, "Oh my God, Rena, you're so good at this." A minute or two of moaning and squelching continued, a minute or two of silence, and then, "God, Rena, you're just a vicious woman." "I know, lover. That's why you like me." It's just amazing how quickly love can die. I went from boundless love and affection to absolute hatred in a matter of seconds. The whole time I was struggling with myself. Should I kick down the door and kick ass, or sit back and use what I had just learned to make plans? Strike while it's hot, or wait and find out names, dates, and locations? If I pounce on them now, it will be a he said, she said situation in divorce court. I could say I overheard, and she would adamantly deny it. I needed more information. Besides, by kicking down the door, I might never find out who Mark was or if there were any other men besides Mark and the guy in the next room with Sabrina. No, I'd still get my ass kicked eventually, but not on this night. I hurried out of the building and into my car before it was time to leave, telling Sabrina to wait for me. When I entered the ballroom, I saw Sabrina sitting at a table with two couples and one man. Sabrina was 5 feet 8 inches tall, and the guy she was sitting next to was about 4 inches taller, so unless he had very short legs, I assumed he was about 6 feet tall. His wavy black hair and pencil-thin mustache, even before I approached the table, made me assume he was a real fat guy. Sabrina noticed my approach, stood up, and backed away from the table. She opened her arms to embrace me and moved to kiss me, but at the last second I turned my head and accepted a kiss on the cheek. I noticed the surprise on her face and said, "I think I'm sick with something, dear. I don't want to pass it on to you." She agreed, and then introduced me to the people at the table. Fatty's name was Ron, and when he stood up to shake my hand, I could see that I was very close in my speculation. I was 6 feet tall, and we were about eye level with each other. This was only important because I wanted to know his reach when I went after him. We sat down, and I started chatting with my wife's co-workers. I sensed that the two couples were a little anxious, like they were waiting for something. I danced 2 numbers with Sabrina, and during the second one she whispered in my ear, "Just because you're sick won't stop you from jumping on my bones tonight, will it? I've been horny as hell all day just thinking about you." Yeah, I bet you are, I thought. I wanted to say, "No, Rena, I don't think so," but I didn't. I'd never called her Rena like Ron had, and I wasn't ready to do anything to alarm her yet, so I said, "We'll just wait and see how things go and how I feel when we get home." Sabrina didn't know it yet, but she was never going to have sex with me again. When the music ended and we went back to the table, there was another man sitting there talking to Ron, and Sabrina introduced me to Mark. He was 6 feet tall, maybe 6 feet tall. He had soft hands and a weak chin, and I filed that information away in my mind. After about 10 minutes, Mark got up to chat with people at another table, and I followed him with the edge of my eye. I wasn't surprised to see him walk through the door leading to the room where Sabrina was having sex with Ron. Apparently, Ron was setting him up while Sabrina and I were on the dance floor. After a couple minutes, Sabrina got up, kissed me on the cheek, and said she was going to the bathroom. Ron let her move a few feet away from the table and then asked me what I thought about the Broncos' Super Bowl chances. Apparently, Sabrina had told him that I was an avid soccer fan, and he decided to use that to keep me occupied while Sabrina slipped away to Mark. While I was talking to Ron about soccer, out of the corner of my eye, I watched the door that Mark came out through, and less than a minute later, Sabrina walked through it. It was almost 15 minutes before Sabrina returned to the table, and I continued talking to Ron and pretended not to notice how long she'd been gone. I wondered if Ron realized what I was doing. Sabrina got fucked and Mark got a little more than just sex. I don't know if anyone else at the table noticed it, but after 10 years of marriage, I could discern the signs. I don't think Sabrina even realized I knew her that well. After she returned to the table, I started dancing with her again, and she pressed herself against me. "I'm horny, baby. Really, really horny." Please don't let me down tonight. I need you, love. I really need you. If this party wasn't so damn political, I'd take you out of here right now." Sabrina danced with the few people she submitted to, then sat at her boss's table talking to him for 15 minutes. Walking back to our table, she whispered, "Okay, lover, I got noticed and I danced with the people I was supposed to dance with. Go home, lover. Be ready for me. I really need this." We were in separate cars and I gave her a good head start. I wanted her home, undressed and on the bed by the time I arrived. That way she would be able to fully experience the effects of what I had planned. I drove slowly so she would have time to become what I wanted her to be. When I arrived home, I rushed upstairs and through the bedroom to the bathroom where I pretended to spew my insides. I stood in the tub, making the appropriate noises for a few minutes, and then walked over to the sink, flushed the water, and wiped my forehead with a wet rag. After wiping my face with the towel, I made my way to the bedroom and found Sabrina lying naked on the bed. "I'm sorry, baby. I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to sleep in the spare bedroom tonight, and I'll call the doctor in the morning." I could see she was angry as I left the room. In the morning, I got up before Sabrina and was sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee and trying to look like I was sick when she walked into the room. "Feeling better?" she asked. "Not really. I hardly slept at all." I looked at my watch. "The doctor's office doesn't open until 8:30. I should call work and let them know I won't be in today." I reached for the phone while she poured herself a cup of coffee and then went to get ready for work. "Don't forget I'll be late today," she said. "We're still working on that damned budget proposal, which should be ready by next Tuesday." "Yeah, I have no doubt it will be," I thought, hanging up the phone and not making the call. After Sabrina left for work, I got dressed, went into my office, and tidied up the work I couldn't leave undone, then told the receptionist that I had a doctor's appointment and wouldn't be in for the rest of the day. I left the office and headed for the public library. Digging through the reference books, I soon found the addresses and phone numbers for Ronald Bragg and Mark Travail. Then, using the library's computers, I found information on the company Sabrina worked for. I found the names, addresses, and phone numbers of all the officers of the company and all the directors. I checked the biographies of the top officers and the chairman of the board to see how they might react to the scandal, and I was pleased with what I found. Unless I was wrong in my assumptions, even the slightest hint of scandal would get Sabrina and her two bully buddies kicked out on their asses. That evening, I parked near Sabrina's place of employment and, when she got out of the car at 5:10, followed her as she drove across town. She pulled into the motel parking lot, got out of the car, and walked up to room 131. She knocked, the door opened, Mark stepped aside and let her inside. 20 minutes later, Ron pulled up, got out of the car, and headed to room 131. I could only assume he was also attending the budget meeting. I wondered if Sabrina's company appreciated her employees working on the budget on their own time and at their own expense. I could be wrong. Perhaps one of them turned in an expense report at the meeting. Yes, that's right. I wrote down the make, model, and license plate number of Ron's car and drove home. On the way, I pondered what else I had learned about Ron and Mark. Both were married, but I had no way of knowing if they were happily married or not. All I could point to was that neither of them had been to a corporate party. I needed to find out more about them and maybe involve them in my plan to tear Sabrina, Ron, and Mark's ass up. I also thought about some things I hadn't paid attention to before, like the fact that Sabrina is always late for work on Mondays and Thursdays. I never doubted her when she told me that she was late on Mondays because they had to deal with all the problems that came up over the weekend. She worked late on Thursday because that was the day they had to finish all the reports that needed to be turned in on Friday. Why was I doubting her? I was stupid with love when it came to her. It was only now that I realized how stupid I had been. I was lying in bed reading when I heard her come home. I turned off the light, put the book down, and pretended to be asleep. She opened the door, peeked in, then closed the door and went into her bedroom, and a few minutes later I heard the shower running. Sleep never came that night. I lay there looking up at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I could destroy the three of them at the same time. It had to be done by all three of them at once, because I didn't want any of them to see something happen to the others and take steps to protect themselves. After it was done, I would let them know who did it, and they would understand why. And that's when it hit me. I sat down, turned on the light, and picked up the book I was reading. It was a murder mystery about a man who had been framed. He was convicted on planted evidence, and a lawyer and a private investigator were frantically trying to prove his innocence before he was executed. That would be enough, I thought, setting the book aside and turning off the light. Now that I knew what I was going to do, I fell asleep and slept like a baby. Friday morning, I told Sabrina that the doctor said I had the intestinal flu and that with medication it should go away in a couple days. I'm still a little weak, but he says I should be strong enough to go to work on Monday. He doesn't want me to do anything but rest over the weekend. Sabrina touched my cheek and said, "Rest and gain strength, sweetie. You're going to need it. I've been deprived and I need to make up for lost time," and left for work. I got dressed and left the house to continue my research. By the end of the day, I learned that Ron's wife was a lawyer's secretary and that she wasn't at the party because she had gone out of town to visit her sick mother. Mark's wife was in real estate sales and missed the party because she was trying to close a deal on a $2 million estate sale. Both marriages seemed stable, but I guessed that was because neither woman knew what their husbands were doing. I would fix that, and very soon. I spent a quiet weekend at home and told Sabrina that I felt ready to go to work on Monday. I'm still a little weak, but I'll be fine as long as I don't overdo it. Monday night, I picked Sabrina up again at the same motel, but now in room 146, and Ron met her at the door and let her inside. 5 minutes later, Mark pulled up and entered the room. I wrote down Mark's car details and drove home. I was still asleep in the spare bedroom and pretended to be asleep when Sabrina came home. I needed to find a new excuse to stay away from her. I couldn't use the flu as an excuse forever, and I needed at least another week to work out my plan. I decided to keep things simple. I would use one of Sabrina's tricks against herself. Whenever she and I fought or argued about anything, Sabrina would always shut me down until she decided to make up with me. As much as she loved sex, it never bothered her that I was disconnecting from her for a whole 6 months. But of course now I knew why it didn't bother her. She was only disconnecting from me, not from her lovers. When I got home from work on Tuesday, Sabrina was already waiting for me. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Pretty good." "Want to have some fun in the bedroom?" "After dinner. I need to build up my strength a little more." I'd been thinking about this all day, about how to piss Sabrina off enough to deprive me of sex. The idea didn't come to me until after lights out. I was walking to the elevator, and one of the records department employees was walking in front of me. She was wearing pants. I admired her ass and suddenly smiled. I knew what I was going to do. We finished dinner, I helped clear the table, then Sabrina washed the dishes and I dried them and put them away. "Ready to catch up, love?" "Lead the way." She undressed and shed her clothes as we headed for the bedroom, and I wondered how she could want me to fuck her so badly when she clearly didn't care about me. She thought I was weak, and she told her boyfriend so. She treated me with contempt, so why be so insistent on me making love to her? This time, she didn't insist after I finished with her. I decided to suddenly have extreme sex with her. "Stop it. Stop it," she sobbed. "I don't like it. You know I don't like it." "How do you know, Sabrina? You've never let me try it before. How do you know you don't like it if you've never tried it?" I said, pondering. "At least you've never tried it with me. Maybe you found out you didn't like it when you did it with one of your boyfriends." Sabrina buried her head in the pillow, her sobs turning to moans, and I smiled as I listened to them and wrinkled my nose. I hadn't had sex in over a week, and I couldn't make sex with my abuser last as long as I would have liked, but it lasted long enough to accomplish my goal. My plan was not without some risk to me. If I was caught doing what I was supposed to do, I would be destroyed. That I was willing to take such a risk spoke volumes about how much I craved revenge. It was expensive, but if it brought what I wanted, it would be the best money I'd ever spent. Phone calls to friends who had friends who knew people helped put me in touch with the right person, and a midnight meeting in a parking lot brought me what I was supposed to get. By the following Sunday, I was ready, and when Sabrina left for work on Monday morning, the decision was made. I followed Sabrina back to the motel that evening, and when she and her two lovers were settled in room 136, I got out of the car and headed for Ron's house. The car was unlocked. I opened the trunk and put a half-pound of marijuana behind the spare tire. Mark's car was locked, so I had to use a Slim Jimmy I bought from a Snap-on tool vendor to get into the car. I opened the trunk and put a pound of weed in there and then locked the car, dumping an ounce of weed on the rear bumper so the police would have enough to search it. After driving half a block away, I called the police from a payphone and told them there was a drug buy going on in motel room 136 and then gave the license plate numbers of Sabrina, Ron, and Mark's car. They asked my name and I quickly said, "No way, dude, I'm not going to get set up by a bunch of Colombians," and hung up. I got to another payphone, called all 3 local TV stations, and gave them the same information I had given the cops. There had just been an election, and the new mayor had declared a war on drugs, and I knew the cops would react quickly. The TV stations knew the same thing, and they'd be there to do a report. I drove another block to the 3rd payphone, called Ron and Mark's wives to let them know their husbands were in room 136 of the Seabreeze Motel with a woman, and then drove back and parked by the roadside where I could watch the scene without drawing attention to myself. The police arrived after only 10 minutes, but it took another half hour to get everything organized. A couple of patrol cars showed up first, then a SWAT van, followed by 2 unmarked cars packed with plainclothes detectives. By the time the cops were ready, the reporters were already in place, and the TV vans had already arrived. I watched as 2 SWAT officers broke down the door to the motel room and let 4 more SWAT officers inside with guns at the ready. God, I wished I was on the wall and could have seen Sabrina's face when the door collapsed. 3 minutes later, Sabrina, Mark, and Ron were led out of the room in handcuffs. Mark and Ron were in their underwear, and Sabrina was naked under a blanket thrown over her shoulders. I pressed the preset button on my cell phone and called the president of Sabrina's company. When he answered, I said, "Are you aware that 3 of your middle managers are trafficking drugs from your corporate office?" I told him who they were and what was going on at Seabreeze even as we talked. I made the same call to all 5 board members and then drove home. When the police searched Ron and Mark's cars, they found pot and an ounce of cocaine in Sabrina's purse. Under the front seat of her car, they found another 4 ounces. Not knowing what Ron and Mark's wives looked like, I don't know if they were in the crowd that gathered or not, but I really hoped they were there. This story was shown on the 10 o'clock news on channels 2 and 7. I laughed when the anchor on 7 said, "Mayor Jones today began to fulfill his campaign promise. Police took down a major drug ring operating out of a city motel. No news yet on how much was seized." Footage of the 3 arrested drug lords was shown, and we were urged to stay tuned for the latest news. I turned off the TV, unplugged my phone, and went to bed. I laughed when Sabrina asked me to mortgage the house so she could post bail. She finally talked her parents into putting up the money, and when she got out of jail and came home, she found all the locks changed and all her stuff stacked in boxes in the driveway. "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked. "Because you're a harlot, and I don't want anything more to do with you." "But you don't understand. If you would only let me explain." "I got all the explanation I needed when I saw you being led naked out of your motel room on the news," and I slammed the door in her face. I helped her father load all his stuff into the U-Haul truck, but refused to talk to him about his daughter. Sabrina called 2 or 3 times a day, but I never spoke to her. And when she showed up at my office one day, I had security escort her out of the building. As it happened, she, Mark, and Ron had been downsized at their firm, and all three of them weren't doing too well with their legal problems. Even though they were first-time offenders because of the mayor's anti-drug stance, they didn't get the probation that many other criminals got. It didn't help that they kept claiming their innocence even when they were caught with the product. Sabrina hurt herself badly when she demanded a blood test to prove there were no drugs in her system. The test showed that she was clean as a whistle, which allowed the prosecutor to argue that this was proof that the drugs found in her purse and car were for sale and not for personal use. Because the mayor wanted to show immediate results of his war on drugs, the three were offered a deal: 1 year in jail and 2,000 hours of community service. With good behavior, they could be out in 9 months. Their lawyer told them they were facing jail time, and they agreed. While Sabrina was behind bars, I filed for divorce, as did Ron's wife and Mark's wife. All three served their time, and when they got out, I continued to follow them. When the time came, I visited Mark. I later learned that he had 3 broken ribs and an arm when he was admitted to the maternity ward of the hospital. I suppose he could have pressed charges, but I was willing to take my chances in front of a jury. A man stomping on the man who slept with his wife would have gotten the jury's sympathy anyway. Either Mark apparently figured that would be the case, or he felt guilty about what he had done, so he left it at that. Ron and Sabrina lived together, and one night I caught them leaving the bar. After finishing with Ron and hitting him over the head for the 6th time, I turned to Sabrina and said, "Not bad for a weakling, eh? Rena, remember the Christmas party where you entertained Ron in that little back room? Remember how he said, 'If he's as weak as you say he is, we can sleep together in front of him and get away with it.' Remember." "Rena?" I saw her face change as it became clear and laughed. "That's right, Rena. That weakling got revenge for your cheating. Better call an ambulance for your boyfriend. He doesn't look so hot." She was still looking at me as I got in the car and drove away.